It is often stated that civilizations collapse through warfare, yet occasionally they deteriorate within the private quarters. In 38 CE, at the peak of Roman dominance, a youthful bride entered the marble entrances of the Palatine Palace. She was known as Valyria Messalina, merely 15 years old, chosen to wed Emperor Claudius, a gentleman well beyond double her years, weak in physique, yet burdened with imperial power. To the Roman populace, this union appeared as an assurance. A fruitful empress of aristocratic lineage, a maiden destined to represent morality, produce offspring, and stabilize a dynasty still troubled by Caligula's insanity. Underneath the floral decorations of that matrimonial celebration, a different narrative had already commenced to unfold, the story that would etch her name into recollection as the most wicked empress in Rome. Upon initial observation, Messalina seemed completely the perfect spouse. Historical narrators portray a beauty that Rome cherished. Fair complexion, blonde tresses, and the refined, noble characteristics that distinguished her from common females of the metropolis. She fulfilled her initial responsibilities flawlessly, bearing Claudius 2 offspring, and attending ceremonial functions with elegance and composure. Within the strict ethical standards of Roman existence, where females were categorized as the matrona, the virtuous spouse, and the meretrix, the courtesan, she was anticipated to exemplify purity. What if the exact disparity between what Rome required of her and what she covertly craved became the mechanism of her downfall? Were you aware that numerous alleged Messalina exited the imperial residence after hours masked as a sex worker employed in a house of ill repute in the Subura region? Tacitus recounts that she competed against Rome's most inferior courtesans, resolved to demonstrate she could accommodate more patrons than any of them. Envision the astonishment of a senator entering such an establishment merely to identify the empress beneath theatrical makeup and inexpensive fragrance. It was not despair that motivated her. It was the excitement, the defiance, and an obsessive impulse to utilize her sexuality as a weapon against the civilization that revered her innocence. The brothel adventures were merely the commencement. Within the imperial residence, she transformed Claudius's court into a venue of indecency. Visualize the feasts, sofas covered in silk, golden dishes overflowing with roasted dormice, and figs dripping with honey, wine flowing from gem-encrusted goblets. Senators lounged in nervous quietude, while Messalina oversaw not as a respectable hostess, but as a director of festivities, calling forth gladiators recently from the amphitheater, prisoners from faraway territories, even aristocratic sons and daughters to entertain her with degrading diversions. One hushed account alleged she once organized a competition between herself and Rome's most renowned courtesan, Scylla, wagering she could surpass the professional in pure stamina. At daybreak, Scylla collapsed after servicing 25 gentlemen. Messalina persisted, surpassing 30. Her triumph received not with ovation, but with appalled silence. What motivated her actions? Was it craving without boundaries or something more calculating? A deliberate method to manipulate the empire's nobility through disgrace. Her victims spanned all social strata. Military commanders forced into compliance. Noble women extorted into humiliating performances. The offspring of senators pulled into her exhibitions. Rejection was virtually inconceivable. Those who rejected her propositions frequently encountered abrupt demises. A military officer discovered drifting in the Tiber. An aristocrat deprived of position by morning. The communication was unambiguous. Rome's empress did not tolerate refusal. Even Philhen. She conducted rituals ridiculing Venus and Bacchus, initially cloaking herself in clerical garments, subsequently ripping them off, compelling attendees to perform lewd ceremonies honoring the deities. For Rome, faith served as the adhesive of civilization, connecting inhabitant to inhabitant and municipality to municipality. Through defiling it, she suggested that she exclusively was the genuine divinity within the imperial residence, goddess not of affection, but of supremacy. Envision the emotional devastation within Roman households. A senator's spouse, shamed publicly, arriving home wordlessly. A daughter separated from her father's estate, re-emerging several days later with gaze refusing to meet his. Claudius himself, frequently depicted as feeble or unintelligent, appeared incapable or disinclined to halt her. Was he oblivious to her transgressions or acquiescent through quietude? Scholars continue to debate, yet the outcome is evident. Messalina's reputation circulated throughout the realm, not as an emblem of fruitfulness and honor, but as an anathema. Nevertheless, the empire persisted with its empress. Marketplaces hummed, armies advanced, chariots thundered in the Circus Maximus. Rome's brilliant exterior endured, while its ethical foundation decayed beyond public view. Each murmur concerning Messalina eroded the Senate's influence. Each controversy diminished trust in the imperial household. Rome, formerly esteemed for restraint and morality, observed its most prominent woman transform immorality into an instrument of governance. The remnants on the Palatine remain standing. Their murals have dimmed, their pillars fractured. However, beneath the accumulation of ages, her specter persists. The adolescent bride who evolved into the most dreaded courtesan of her era. Her narrative presents a query that resonates chillingly through time. What transpires when the individual selected to represent morality adorns herself with corruption? Authority in Rome existed never merely in legislation or sculpted in stone. It was exhaled in sleeping chambers, negotiated during banquets, and in Messalina's situation, exercised through the form of an empress. As the duration of her reign progressed, her desires did not wane. They intensified, became more calculated, and significantly more perilous. What originated as clandestine nocturnal excursions developed into an apparatus of depravity that ensnared Rome's most influential males and females in a web of disgrace. Tacitus, Suetonius, and Juvenal, each possessing his own bitterness, documented the deterioration. They assert that Messalina created what could merely be termed an imperial house of prostitution concealed conspicuously within an opulent residence near the campus marshes. This was not a dwelling for ordinary carnality. It was an enterprise crafted with merciless cunning. Noble women compelled under menace of destruction were obligated to attend her. Senators, military commanders, and tradesmen arrived under deceptive circumstances merely to discover themselves compromised in manners that ensured their discretion. Subsequent narratives allege she employed that information to extort entire households, acquiring riches, provincial leadership positions, and compliance without mobilizing a single military unit. The minor episodes of her sovereignty are disturbing. Visualize a youthful aristocratic female removed from her father's entrance hall and obligated to perform as a courtesan under Messalina's observant gaze. Envision senators deprived of their official garments, forced into humiliating exhibitions before adversaries who would subsequently capitalize on their dishonor. One warrior who fled the residence stated the ordeal surpassed combat, confessing, "Blood congeals. Disgrace persists eternally." This constituted Messalina's merciless ingenuity. She discovered that sexual degradation could shatter men more thoroughly than weaponry. Her brutality advanced with exhibition. By the initial 42nd CE, her assemblies were infamous. Masquerading as celebrations for Venus or Bacchus, they commenced with solemn incense ascending toward the deities, then deteriorated into choreographed debaucheries where the governing class engaged in behaviors they would never courageously acknowledge. Messalina orchestrated the entire spectacle like a conductor. Senators were matched with adversaries. Military commanders were compelled into repugnant competitions. Aristocratic spouses were uncovered before clamoring assemblies of the privileged. Declination signified catastrophe. Acquiescence implied devastation. All departed connected not by allegiance, but by mutual and crushing humiliation. The most alarming narrative concentrated less on public exhibition and more on her compulsion to contend. She regarded intimacy as a gladiator's athletic contest. Her most notorious competition, the stamina challenge against Scylla, Rome's acclaimed courtesan, appalled the capital city. Before a chosen assembly of aristocrats, Scylla regulated her pace meticulously, attending to 25 gentlemen throughout the extended evening until fatigue overcame her. Messalina did not cease. She persisted beyond 30, declining to surrender until no participants remained. By sunrise, she had prevailed, and with that conquest destroyed any pretense of Roman honor. The Empress of Rome, spouse to Claudius, had transformed herself into a public exhibition, reveling in debasement, not as dishonor, but as conquest. Why would a female nurtured in advantage, revered for attractiveness, and enthroned as empress, adopt debasement as her supreme enjoyment? Scholars seek explanations. Some propose unquenchable desire. Others indicate a craving for authority. Some perceive the psychological damage of wedlock at such a tender age to an elderly, inelegant spouse. Possibly the reality is more straightforward and more terrifying. For Messalina, the dichotomy was exhilarating. The more her public position required purity, the more exhilarating it became to violate it. Her realm of sensuality yielded repercussions. The Senate, previously enfeebled, discovered itself paralyzed by extortion. Provincial administrators were selected not for competence, but for discretion. Military commanders remained faithful, not through integrity, but through dread of disclosure. Rome's political strategies contorted under her imperceptible manipulation. Foreign diplomats murmured of peculiar deliberations where senators appeared subdued, preoccupied, nearly shattered. The empire's administration was being devoured by one woman's obsession. Moral decay generates adversaries. The military personnel, historically patient with imperial extravagance, commenced to grumble. Faithfulness deteriorated when gossip circulated that their fellow soldiers had been summoned to Messalina's estate and deprived of respect before her visitors. For males toughened by warfare, degradation was more severe than mortality. The military quarters resonated with murmurs and imprecations that in other contexts would have constituted treason. Her suspiciousness intensified. Security increased. Penalties became more severe. The exhibitions grew more merciless, as if intensifying the disgrace could suppress insurrection. Each action created fresh fractures in the delicate veneer of her reign of sensuality. Rome had endured conflagration, epidemic, and hostile takeover. Could it endure an empress who governed through debasement? The critical moment occurred in 48 CE with an action so audacious it continues to astonish historians. While Claudius was absent in Ostia, Messalina orchestrated a nuptial ceremony. Not a clandestine meeting or a confidential vow, but a complete Roman marriage to her paramour, the senator Garcilas. Clergy participated, witnesses endorsed, agreements were finalized. Every ceremony Rome mandated was implemented to validate the matrimony. Legally, she was now wedded to Caius while simultaneously retaining the designation of empress and spouse of Claudius. This was not simply controversy. It was overt insurrection. She emerged from concealment into openness. Her carnality converted to betrayal. What could have propelled her to such insanity? Did she anticipate Claudius would capitulate, that the Senate would acquiesce, that Rome would tolerate two husbands for its empress? Or was it obsession, the necessity to intensify until annihilation was inevitable? Regardless of the intention, the deed proved lethal. Devoted freedmen hastened to notify Claudius. Initially, he chuckled. Certainly, it was an outlandish report. As evidence mounted, amusement transformed to fury. The emperor ridiculed and betrayed ultimately acted. Claudius journeyed back to Rome with military personnel accompanying him. Messalina was discovered in the gardens of the imperial residence she had governed like a deity of corruption. Classical authors depict her final moments with dispassionate precision. She implored and petitioned, presented her offspring as captives. When clemency was not granted, she attempted to end her own existence, then hesitated. A warrior delivered the fatal blow. The empress who had subjugated Rome through disgrace perished not in magnificence but in terror and gore. Her retribution did not conclude with mortality. Claudius commanded her sculptures demolished, her name expunged, her recollection damned to obscurity. Damnatio memorial. Nevertheless, Rome never recollection faded. The more they attempted to inter her, the more pronounced her saga expanded. Position yourself in the Palatine remnants presently, and the quietude feels oppressive. Tourists might appreciate the tilework, Yet the stones whisper of something more sinister. The house of prostitution, the insurrectionists, the extortion, the prohibited matrimony. Messalina's narrative persists not because Rome desired it recounted, but because it could not be suppressed. Ultimately, her inheritance represents a caution engraved throughout centuries. Civilizations do not succumb exclusively to hostile incursion. They can crumble from depravity that festers within their own barriers. She demonstrated that desire can be as devastating as metal weaponry. She revealed that disgrace can restrain males more securely than manacles. History concludes her chronicle with a veracity as merciless as her existence. Rome's most hazardous instrument was not the blade.